Welcome to ASSAT Analysts, the debate game show where the points definitely matter and we take things way too seriously. My name is Josh Johnson, and I'm joined here with my roommates, Nathaniel Jackson.
Yo.
And Kyle Jennis.
Howdy.
Stay tuned to find out who truly is the king of pulling random facts and arguments right out of their ass. Welcome to our bullshitter episode, where two of us were able to do research and one of us was not. And we have our guest here, Ryan Dailey, who is going to be trying to finger which one of us did not do research.
I hardly know her.
So today's bullshitter topic is what is the most interesting polytheistic religion? We'll go ahead and go around. We'll reveal our choice and do an opening statement. So Kyle, what you got?
I went with Hinduism. The reason I picked Hinduism, it is a religion in that it has like deities and everything, but it's also kind of like a philosophy, like kind of a way of life as well. The big thing about it, it's driven by 4 objectives of human life. They are, I hope I pronounce all these correctly. If anyone in the comments wants to correct me, feel free. So they are Dharma, which is righteousness or ethics. Artha, livelihood and wealth. Kama, sensual pleasure, anything like that. And then moksha, which is liberation or freedom. And there are four of the major gods in Hinduism, which all symbolize some of these practices. The 4 major ones are Shiva, who is known as the destroyer. In the main branch of Hinduism, he's the supreme lord who creates, penetrates, and transforms the universe, as described in the text. There is, yes, thanks, Nate. There is Durga, who is one of the principal aspects of the mother goddess. She is the deity of protection, strength, and peace, prosperity against any sort of demonic forces which threaten said peace, prosperity. There is Lakshmi, which translates as she who leads to one's goal, who is also another aspect of the mother goddess, who is the deity of wealth, fortune, power, and beauty, stuff like that. And then there is Vishnu, the preserver, who is also one of these supreme beings responsible for protecting the universe and all that stuff. Yeah.
I actually have a quick question.
Okay.
Do you know roughly what percentage of people actually still follow Hinduism?
Yes. It's the 3rd most popular religion altogether in the world. The percentage is somewhere between 15 and 16%. The count is about 1.2 billion.
Whew. It's a lot bigger than mine.
Well, I mean, a lot of the...
Yeah, it's definitely the largest polytheistic religion.
Yeah.
A large majority of the population obviously resides in India, and obviously there are other neighboring countries where Hinduism is still practiced. But yeah, it's a lot of the world actually practices Hinduism. If you think about it, it's like a big chunk of the earth. It's 7 billion and counting. A seventh of that is practicing Hinduism, which is, I think, one of the older religions or practices as well.
Yeah.
It originates, I think, the word itself, Hindu, comes from, it's a term used to describe people who initially lived near or around the Indus River in India. So it's actually a geographical originating term from about somewhere between 550 and I think 480 BCE.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of old.
All right. So the religion I picked is called Shinto. It is Japanese in practice and origin. Well, actually, that's not technically true. A lot of people believe that it kind of was stolen from a lot of Chinese beliefs, as was their written language. But it is inspired by the Chinese and adopted. It is actually a very interesting religion. One of the reasons that I find it interesting is because it's not a religion unlike a lot of these other religions, and I don't know a lot about Norse, but I know Hindu. You believe this religion, you can't believe in other religions. Shinto is not like that. In fact, most people in Japan actually don't consider themselves to be necessarily believers in Shinto as much as they practice it culturally because of the cultural impact it has and the prevalence it has in Japan. However, Shinto, essentially what Shinto is, it is a religion based off of elements and nature. It is the belief that kami, or gods, reside in all living things, and there are not necessarily names for these kami. Now, it is also unique in that, kind of like Hinduism, a lot of the gods are not only humanoid, but also animals. A lot of these kami are spiritual animals. One of the more popular being, for example, the nine-tailed fox, which is just a commonly not worshipped, celebrated kami, or god. But basically, in Japan, there are a bunch of temples or shrines. There's hundreds of thousands of them. And there's actually some outside of Japan, but it's very rare. And at these shrines, people will go. There are festivals in these shrines. Something very unique about Shinto as well is they believe that when you die, you also become a kami, and that kami will then be. It's best way to word this. There is a very familial aspect to Shinto that you kind of worship or pray to your past relatives and ancestors who have become kami, and who are believed to live within the estate and within the shrine that you build for your family, which is very interesting to me. But there's also this huge crossover where Buddhism has kind of been was spread from China into Japan, and there's this common practice now with Buddhism and Shinto. And actually, during leading up from World War II to World War I to World War II, there was a lot of Buddhist marks and images put onto Shinto shrines throughout Japan. And following World War II, the state actually decided to separate the two and say, no, they are separate, but because Shinto isn't really as much a religion that you worship as much as something that you pay respect to and a part of culture, they don't necessarily believe that you can only follow one religion. So many people in Japan still worship both Shinto and do Buddhist practices. So,
okay, interesting.
Very cool.
So the polytheistic religion that I chose to talk about is Asatru, or Norse paganism. It actually, the religion itself doesn't actually have a name because it was just the beliefs and the cultural systems that the people in the Icelandic and Germanic areas practiced. And so Asatru is just the kind of Icelandic phrase for the worship or the recognition of the Asir, and the following, kind of the lifestyles that are laid out in Odin's Havamal, which is kind of it's a kind of a book about, it's a series of poems about kind of a way of life or how to live life. And one thing that I really like about this is that it's technically a religion, but it's not in the same sense of like these are sets of rules and things that you should follow. It's more of a way of interacting with one another, and a belief system about the way that you get into their afterlife has a lot more to do with your character and who you are as a person rather than the things that you do, or specific rules that you follow. And so I think it is just a really cool kind of it's a really cool way of living and thinking about that and being spiritual with these entities that are deities that don't have, even though sometimes they're depicted as having kind of humanistic characteristics and physical bodies and things like that, they're really thought of as more of just like consciousnesses that have this immense power because they don't have a physical form and they're not limited by physical boundaries or things that we as humans can understand. And so it's There is a lot of backlash in the community nowadays about the actually calling it Asatru, because there is a lot of racial tendencies that have come about. There's the AFA, which is the I think it's the Asatru Followers Alliance, I think is what it is, that has the leaders of it have come out and posted on Facebook and social media and things like that a lot about how there's like a link between it's become white supremacy and somewhat linked to Nazism, but there are a decent amount, which is why people who actually practice tend to call themselves or identify as either heathens or Norse paganisms or Norse polytheists, because it allows them to kind of differentiate from that necessarily way of thinking.
How do you spell it?
Spell what?
Asatru?
Asatru?
Asatru.
ASATRU.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you for teaching me something.
Yep. Which is so, and it is the like atru, it just means like to follow. So it's like the asa referring to the seer, but then there's also like odatru, which is like the following of Odin specifically, and tiratru, following of Tyr, the god of war. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
The other, I mean, and this is all like, so these are things that have come from kind of the being able to piece together kind of stories and things like that from the past, because unlike these other religions or practices like Shinto, a lot of it was passed down through oral tradition. And so most of the actual texts or writings that we have from it are actually written by Christians who came in and were kind of, living among these people, trying to learn about them and also trying to convert them to Christianity. And so a lot of it is kind of belittling what the actual belief system was and what the culture was. And so one of the things that they do write about, though, is similar to, like you said, Shinto, you're allowed to practice other religions. It was actually custom in these cultures, too, if you're traveling to a place, and if they are worshiping gods or, giving a sacrifice or in some way communing with their religion, you were actually supposed to worship their gods along with yours as a show of like community and interacting with them, and like, hey, like I'll do this with you as, being a part of that communal thing. So there was, I mean, even it's part of the reason that it was a little bit easier to transition them into Christianity was because they didn't necessarily deny that, Abraham's God existed. They just were like, okay, yeah, but he's just one of them, It's like, yeah, that's your God, these are ours.
Interesting. Is it still a practiced like living religion?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Interesting.
So, and again, that's what I was saying, like one of the kind of factions of it, because it is mostly based around community, it's more difficult to get into if you don't live in specific areas where it is able to be a part of that. But the AFA has kind of shed a lot of negative light on it, with the belief that, making claims about, only being able to connect to the Asir if you have Aryan blood, and so which a lot of people are choosing in the community to disassociate with that, and so that's why they don't necessarily identify as Asatru anymore.
I assume most of the followers probably live in Norway.
So it's that kind of Germanic area of
like Scandinavia, like Norway, Sweden, Finland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
And then it is part of a practice in Germany. Actually, as a part of moving into Nazism, and they had tried to, because part of the problem with Christianity, with Nazism specifically, is that Jesus was a Jew, or born to a Jewish family, and that it was Abraham's God, which created Judaism, and so that kind of clashed a lot with Nazism. And so they tried to kind of mold this like more original beliefs of the Germanic area into kind of like melded into society, and they were trying to kind of reform Christianity into something like that, and then it kind of got scrapped. They were like, yeah, we're just going to focus on the war. But which is kind of where that kind of mindset and that faction that is now the AFA has kind of come from. But
interesting.
There is a decent amount of practicing Norse pagans, or as they identify, heathens sometimes. There's like 4 different words that can mean the same thing, and it honestly just kind of which one you use depends on the context of the conversation and how in-depth you actually want to go. Because if you say, like, I identify as Asatru, then somebody's going to be like, okay, well, what's that? Whereas you could just more easily say Norse pagan, or, you know, and they'll be like, we'll still probably have questions, but it's not as...
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of like, I don't know anything about, I know very little about Norse paganism, but I was just curious, apparently, so Greek mythology, or the actual religion of it, is called Hellenism. Wasn't actually made officially into a religion until 2017.
Wow, that's crazy.
Well, and that's like I said, like it
What?
Also, well, and also I love the fact that you're looking things up during our bullshitter episode. After you gave me so much flack for doing it,
I'm giving you something, looking up something completely
but
unrelated to a different religion.
But it is similar to that in that it wasn't technically considered a religion. It was just the beliefs of those people in that area.
Yeah,
and so it wasn't a religion, and it didn't necessarily have a name because that wasn't a conversation that you needed to have. It didn't have a clean-cut name like Hinduism or Christianity or Judaism.
Yeah, this is completely off topic. I just thought it was interesting. So in 2017, the Greek government finally recognized Hellenism as an official religion over 1,600 years after the ancient Hellenic religion was banned by Emperor Theodosius I.
Lovely. Take that, Grecians. No, I'm just kidding.
It's just interesting. I didn't know that. But yeah, all right, Ryan. So we've each kind of given a small little opening statement. What questions do you have for us?
I guess while Norse is still fresh on my mind, to Josh, I'm kind of confused where the white supremacy has been kind of bled out of it. I don't know. I don't really understand where the racial significance is coming from, especially because my understanding of Scandinavia when this time period would have been is that they just would have stayed across Scandinavia, which was 100% white. I just don't understand where racial significance would have happened.
So that's in more modern kind of reiterations of it and the kind of the rebirth of it. Is more where that comes. And I mean, so it wasn't necessarily an issue in historical times, because you're right. The people they were interacting with, which I mean, in the Viking Age they did spread it around a lot more, but it wasn't necessarily something that was an issue because everybody kind of was white in those areas. So it more so became an issue in probably the latter half of the 20th century.
Gotcha.
And people are kind of pulling away from it, one, because that's not, culturally acceptable nowadays, but also just because the fact that it limits the gods and what they're able to do if you say that you can only connect with the gods if you have Aryan lineage.
Yeah. And then I guess the other thing that I kind of was confused about was I know that there's a strong reference in Norse, I don't know, I want to say mythology. I guess we'll just stick with Norse religion. Because no, my question. You said you described it at once of the interaction was through consciousness. Or I at least remember consciousness being described.
Yeah.
Within could you go over that a bit more?
Yeah. So
I'm confused how that works with gods.
Okay. Yeah. So they view them as the deities as not necessarily like physical beings, or because I mean, even having a physical being would limit you. So it would be, they are more just like consciousnesses of like entities, kind of similar to. It would be similar to like the Christian God doesn't have a physical form. Does that kind of clarify it at all? It's like they can interact in mental states, and they can interact with you through the world around you, like throwing lightning down, affecting storms, things like that. But they're not actual physical beings themselves.
Okay, yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I think most polytheistic religions kind of in modern day would say they believe, because originally all polytheistic religions come out of some sort of natural beliefs or elemental beliefs of like, this element has a god, the sun has a god, the ocean has a god, so I feel like I don't really think most polytheistic religions believed like, hey, no, there are these actual physical beings that lived on top of Mount Olympus. I think they believed, this lightning struck over there, Zeus must be angry. Like,
but okay. So, but there are specifically for like Mount Olympus and Zeus. There are a lot of people that hear polytheist, and they hear like just in a basic understanding of it, and they think that people actually think that, oh, there is a Mount Olympus somewhere. They are just up there in the clouds chilling.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the reason that I brought it up there.
Gotcha.
The other interesting thing about it is that a lot of the depictions, and I mean, some of the stories come from oral traditions and do give some descriptors to these entities. But like I said, a lot of the writings and a lot of the text that we have and the actual pictures and things like that come from Christian writers writing about paganism, trying to, in some cases, actually belittle the power of the gods in order to try to downplay them and push in Christianity into the culture.
Yeah. Okay. I have one more question. What was the AFA thing again?
The AFA, I believe it was the Asatru Followers Association.
Okay. Sounds
okay.
made up to me, just saying.
I think that's all that I have for the Norse Paganism. Going over to Nathaniel.
What's up?
Whatever it is.
Pancakeism.
I mean, whenever I think of that, I just think of Norse mythology, but I don't want to call it mythology.
It is a myth. It's not. I'm just kidding.
Spoken like a good Christian boy.
Yeah.
So going over to
Wait, I
Nathaniel.
don't.
Move on.
Could you say your thing again?
Shinto.
Shinto, yeah. So you're saying it's like originated out of like Japan, right?
Kind of. So Shinto itself is a religion that is practiced only in Japan, and they have no desire to actually expand outside of Japan because it's believed that it's kind of turned into more of a traditional thing than an actual practiced religion. But a lot of it is inspired from Chinese religions. As is Buddhism, which originated in China, it has kind of spread. Shinto is kind of almost an offshoot of an ancient Chinese religion. It's very similar to those practices, that religion that set up that tradition that was then just kind of adapted in Japan and made its own thing.
So it's like exclusively in Japan. I get that for at least like the significance nowadays, but was that like the same for like when it was like for the origin or like of its like beginning?
Not really.
Does it have like a physical significance to Japan? Aside from the temples that they have created inside of it?
There are roughly over roughly 80,000 shrines in Japan. And it is believed that these shrines is where you actually go to practice, to pray to pay respects to the kami, the deities. It's not really practiced outside of Japan because it has turned away from this actual spiritual thing and turned into more of a cultural practice. It's very interesting in the fact that it's almost something. It's a religion that's, I don't want to say not taking itself seriously, but it's very different from other religions in the fact that it has no desire to spread. People that practice Shinto do not have the desire to turn someone who doesn't practice Shinto into someone who would.
It's not an evangelical belief system.
It's not.
Okay.
It is something purely done by most people for the traditions and for the cultural significance. There are festivals, and most people go to these festivals not because necessarily they want to pay respects to these deities, but because it's a cultural thing that people do.
Because it's
and it's part. Yeah, it's part of tradition.
Would you say that's almost comparable? I know I'm kind of comparing things to Christianity, but would that be comparable to Christmas Eve and Easter Christians? Like that only go on those specific nights because
I guess
or non-practicing. I guess
the big difference I would say is that is frowned upon among Christians. People that practice Shinto regularly do not believe, in everything I read, they would not look down on someone who only goes to festivals because it's part of their culture.
Okay.
So it's not really something where like, oh, you don't actually believe in these deities and in the kami of the world, you're a disgrace. It's just part of tradition and culture. Okay. So it's almost like a lifestyle and a practice more so than it is a like practicing religion. There are traditions, there are acts that you do. There's a way to pay honor and tribute to the kami around you, which again, there's this familial connection to them. Most families build their own shrines, and that is how you pay respects to your ancestors. And it's something that you do out of tradition, out of respect. It's not necessarily you believe in like a fish god or a nine-tailed fox. that is a lot of what the how the religion was kind of born, but that is not necessarily what everyone believes.
Okay.
You keep referencing the shrines. Like what I'm picturing is like the traditional like Japanese like wooden towers or temples or anything. Is it like simpler than that?
Can
like,
be. Sometimes it is simpler. So for our listeners, I was going to draw something, but that doesn't help our listeners. For a lot of their shrines, some of their more common shrines are literally picture an H, and then but instead of the bar going across from your two parallel poles, it's on top. You know, it's just I don't know what you would call that. Not an arch. It
almost looks like the symbol pi.
Yeah, yes, it does. And that is traditionally what most of those shrines are. They represent, okay, in this area there is a deity. There is a kami who oversees the nature, the woods, the rivers, the whatever. There's a kami that resides here. Gotcha. Something that's also interesting in Shinto is that there is not necessarily a difference in power or scale to evil kami, and that is something that is just, in Christianity, there is God and then there is Satan, and God is believed to be far more powerful. He's the creator of Satan, and, that's that. There is good kami and there is evil kami, and it's just believed that you try and stay away from the evil kami and you pay respects to the good kami and they'll protect you. And it's like not necessarily a good versus evil, like they're battling each other. They just both exist, and you pay respects to the good kami and hopes of good fortune and that they will help protect you. But
It's like whichever one you feed, you get more of in your life, pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
So you mentioned that this is specific to Japan. Is it has it branched out at all to the other kind of Pacific islands that are near Japan?
Not really. No.
It is. So it's just
purely,
on the four main islands. Okay.
It's purely
Say
concentrated.
main islands, the four islands.
Yeah. It is purely
It basically
Japanese.
has like a strong tradition, and then that's the
Yeah,
root of it.
and like I said, the tradition is mainly rooted in the culture around them. It's not really. They don't have a desire to spread it elsewhere.
Okay.
They
Which
don't
makes
see a
sense
purpose
because
in
why
that.
would I want to worship your ancestors?
Mm-hmm.
So when
would
did you
worship
say that
yours,
the
Josh.
shift kind of happened from it being like more of this kind of religion where people actually did believe in, the spirituality of it, to it just becoming a cultural tradition?
So I don't. I remember reading somewhere about the shift from splitting from when Buddhism kind of worked its way into this religion to when the government actually said, no, we have to separate the two. I did not personally read anything about that shift of becoming a very spiritual thing to part more so practicing culture. I just read that it did happen, but I did not read any specific years.
Okay.
For like in the spiritual sake, was there like any sense of like a stronger afterlife or
The
like
the
an
afterlife
evangelical
is
thing?
in Shinto. They purely believe that once you do die, you also become a kami.
So it's like reincarnation, kind of in a way.
Yeah, so you become one of those deities who. That's why your family builds a shrine. It's you become a part of your ancestors. This is Chinese, but if you look at Mulan, they have the family shrine, and they pay respects to that. It's very similar to that, and I'm assuming whatever that religion is called that they practiced in the Mulan movie, that is probably the religion that helped to inspire some of the practices of Shinto.
Okay. As you were kind of describing it, that was exactly the scene that I was thinking of with the Mushu waking up the ancestor spirits.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there being like the rest of like the fellow like family lineage of kamis or whatever you would like to call them at that point.
Yep.
Mushu's peers, so on.
Well, he's the guardian of the...
Well, there was more than one inside of that.
Yeah, it was.
No,
all
there
the-
certainly
family.
were. Yeah, I guess...
Mushu was the one that was picked, right?
Yeah, and then there was the great stone dragon. Oh, it's me, the great stone dragon.
Did I mention that I was the great stone dragon?
Great movie.
We need to watch that movie again.
We should.
Patreon night?
Okay.
We have a lot of Patreon nights planned.
So, Kyle.
Hi.
Is there a relationship between the caste system and Hindu?
Well, obviously, it's just different, like, social levels. The belief there is you're born into one, and the belief is you try and work your way through that life to not guarantee, but, like, make a statement for why you should be reincarnated as higher up in the caste system. It's a little more social than, like, the philosophical side of it. I didn't take a lot of notes on the caste system. I didn't think, like, that far into, like, the socioeconomic influence of Hinduism on that. I'm sure there is, but that's the main belief that I think there is that ties into Hinduism. Like I said, there's the belief of reincarnation and working your way through eventually over, unfortunately, many lifetimes. But that is the belief, is that through those four practices, you get to the next caste and further up the ladder.
Okay.
Are you guys saying class?
Caste.
Caste.
It's a CASTE. It's like like I said, it's kind of more socioeconomic standings.
It is like class standing, like social classes.
Yeah.
In a sense of, that, I guess. But it is technically called caste, CASTE,
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
according to my history book in middle school.
And me.
I didn't remember that, so good on you.
I think that part of that was going to be one of my questions. Is I remember you mentioning, Kyle, the four strong points. I think Kama was one of them, and then so on.
The practices of life.
Yes. How does karma, because I know that that's like a strong point of Hinduism, play into all of that?
Well, I mean, I didn't think to research that either completely. The I don't know if they don't I don't know if they do it like points like we do, obviously not, but I don't remember. I can't think of the relationship on it right now. I could probably say, obviously,
Is like that like kind of more of like a tree of karma, where like
I
all four of
that's
those are splitting off into it,
that's
or
probably how
off
I would
from it.
that's probably how I would best describe it. Yes, it's like it's rooted in like karma, and obviously that ties into the point of reincarnation. And those four practices, I'll help build your good karma in the eyes of the deities and everything like that. So that's probably how I'd best describe it. It's like the big four of how to become a good person and, get reincarnated as a better, not better person, but someone with different challenges to face, who would still, I guess, try and follow the same four practices.
How to build a good credit score.
Yes, exactly. Before credit scores were a thing.
So that you can jump up to the next tier or increase your credit limit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for like the reincarnation, like based off of like how well you've done in your past life, are you like, how exactly is that like carried out? Like, is that you are just born again, and like if you did really well, you could to move up from middle class to upper middle class, or like
It's
what exactly
essentially
comes
yes.
out of it?
Essentially yes. That's the root of it all is, and obviously you face different challenges if you move into a different social standing, but I guess the test of that is to see how well you can still follow the four practices and use it to better, even if it's a better life you've been given, you can still use those practices to try and better yourself or the people around you. Anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what is the highest tier of it? Because I mean, obviously, if you're building up to something, right?
Probably whatever royalty they have. I don't know if India still has like royalty or any like emperor, like not, I guess, emperors in Japan
Nobility or
yeah,
whatever
basically
their
just some
equivalent
sort
is.
of noble or very wealthy person, anything like that.
Okay,
I can't remember the title for it. But
So if you're top tier, you're either maintaining or
yeah, you're pretty much maintaining and trying to just
not
keep
go down.
essentially, yeah, you're just trying to keep using the same four practices to just live. It's basically about just living as good of a life as you can based on those four practices and based on what the deities teach and also what the texts teach as well. They have it's a collection of books called the Vedas, and I think there's another one called the Bhagavad Gita, if I remember correctly, which is another sacred text of Hinduism.
Okay.
Is the system purely based off of like a social economic thing, or does it also like, like if you're really good, then maybe you get born as a really attractive person? I don't know. Like, does it have like other?
Some
in terms
would,
of like
some would say
physical-
that's a different social class.
I mean, yes, yeah, it's in.
Gosh.
I don't
Well,
know. Like, do you just constantly have a six pack if you did really well in your past one? Like, is there like
I never
other
thought
things that
about
could come out of it?
I never thought about that, to be honest, but
Can you eventually work your way towards becoming a deity?
I don't know if they add more like deities to the book. There is something that talks about like the Hindus do believe. It's a very complex system that because of the fact they have many gods, and the reason it's so like messed and everything. The concept of like the god is based on different traditions and philosophy, like who follows what traditions, who follows what philosophies within it. That's why I think there are so many deities in there, and that's why they have this complex system where so many, like I said with Shiva, he's the ultimate creator and everything, and he's come from these traditions and philosophies of like protecting, but also being able to destroy at will. With Durga, who discusses protection, strength, peace, prosperity, stuff like that.
I think that was like maybe another one of my questions is like, I think a big strong showing with Hinduism is that their deities are very different
Mm-hmm.
than most polytheistic religions, kind of like what Nathaniel was talking about earlier. there's a god of moon, a god of ocean, so on.
Yeah.
For like Hinduism, it seems that like is a bit more unique. It doesn't seem like I think that they do have like gods that are more about the physical universe, but they also have like quite specific ones, or more elaborate.
They're based
any
more
strong
on
reasoning for that?
Well, so one of the big things Hindus believe there's divinity in everything in nature. So that's what and I don't know if that's common in a lot of other polytheistic religions. I mean, obviously with Shinto there is, it's about just finding the sacred, I don't know if I call it energy or just, like I said, divinity of everything around you. It's a sort of like interconnection between everything. So all the Hindu gods, I think, not only do they stand for like just a physical thing, but it's more of like a characteristic or practice of human nature. And because there are so many different things, but that are all interconnected, that's why they have all these deities to represent more accurately and in depth the characteristics of human nature.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I think my last one is, what's the significance of the cows?
I was thinking that
They're
too.
they're very useful. They're very useful animals. Obviously you can use them for milk. You can milk them for that product. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Can you eat them?
No, they cannot eat cows, and I don't remember why.
They can't be that
no,
useful.
they can't. No, they can't eat cows. But I don't know if it's the belief that I don't want to say something and just sound like a complete idiot and offend somebody.
It's okay. I'm sure I offended somebody in my description.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was all over the place.
There is a reason they do not eat cows. It could just be something just as simple as the sacred divinity of them, and it could be more in depth. There's a reason. I don't remember the full depth of the reason, but it is important. And again, I don't want to offend anyone who either is a practicing Hindu or know anyone who is Hindu. That would be rude, and
we apologize for offending anyone who practices any of these religions. We did some research, not a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I don't.
the most research that we did was like probably at most like
solid
an hour.
knowledge about any of this.
Yeah.
But
A lot of it was, at least for me, it was just recollection of like stuff you learn in social studies and everything.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're running at about 42 minutes. So Ryan, you feeling good? Do you have any more questions you want to ask any of the three of us?
I don't know that they'll do any good for me.
All right. Well, I think Josh still needs to write down who he's voting for. We are voting just for fun. Our vote does not matter. Ryan's vote is the only vote that matters. And we're not going to reveal who he votes for until next episode.
And we're not going to reveal who we vote for until next episode either.
That too. Yeah. I genuinely have no clue who it is. So this is going to be an interesting one.
This will be fun.
All right. Well, we will see you guys on Friday during our Simpleton episode.
For the epic conclusion.
Yep. And we'll actually give the point update for the week. Yeah, we'll see you Friday.
Bye.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Be sure to join us on the next episode where we will continue to debate as good friends do. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube and stay up to date on all things asshat, and to participate in polls and activities throughout the week based on the themes of the upcoming episodes.
We also started a Patreon for those of you who are interested in showing your support in a more direct way. On our Patreon, we have a ton of bonus content, including tier lists, loser dinners, and bonus podcast episodes.
We want to continue making content that makes you think, smile, and especially laugh. And the best way that you guys can help us do that, leave a like or a comment, download and share all these episodes with your friends and family members who you think would enjoy our tomfoolery, our shenanigans, and all those other crazy words that encapsulate our content.